Today we are going to talk about women work for rights. We are going to sit down and talk to an expert about women's rights. Tell us about women's work for rights.
Women represent half the world's people. They perform nearly 2/3 of the workday hours and receive only 1/10 of the world's income and owe less than 1% of the world's poverty.
What did you guys do to help out?
We condemned violence and discrimination against women.
What were some of the rights for women?
By 1950, women had won the right to vote in most European nations as well as Japan, China, Brazil, and other countries.
Why did it take so long for women to have rights?
For decades, a global women's movement has focused attention on the needs for women worldwide. We support equal rights for men and women.
Thank you for coming to fill us in about women's rights.
Next up, we have an expert in growing deserts and shrinking forests.
Desertification is a major problem in the Sahel region of Africa. Deforestation is also a major threat in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Deforestation is the cutting of trees without replacement. The reason for deforestation is people cut trees for firewood, shelter, and to sell in markets abroad. Some people burn forests for farms, cattle ranches, and for the industry. The Amazon Basin region of Brazil is the world's largest rainforest. The Amazon rainforest absorbs poisonous carbon dioxide from the air and releases essential oxygen. Also, many animals have habitats in the rainforest that due to deforestation have become extinct. Also, deforestation is used to be cleared to tap into rich mineral resources. And after forests are cleared, rain washes nutrients from the soil, which destroys its fertility. Deforestation also causes erosion, which is the wearing away of land that leads to flooding.
Now we have a story on the causes of poverty.
It can't be determined how many people live in poverty worldwide. There is a large gap between the poor nations and the wealthy nations. The progress made towards reducing poverty has been uneven. In India and China, there has been an economic growth, but there is still extreme poverty existing. Many causes come from poverty. Many of the nations in poverty cannot spend money to improve their living conditions because they are also in a lot of debt. Basic services are very hard to come by in nations that have rapid population growth such as India and China.
Next up, we have an expert on ending hunger and the famine.
For tens of millions of people, hunger posed a daily threat. A major problem is that food did not get distributed to people that need it most, especially in countries that were affected by poverty and civil strife. Hunger escalates into famine when large numbers of people in a region or country face death by starvation. Natural disasters can cause famine. Also, human activity can lead to famine. War disrupts food distribution. During the 1970s and 1980s, civil wars raging in Ethiopia and Sudan intensified the effects of drought, leading to famine. Each side of the conflict tried to keep the relief supplies from reaching the other. In many instances, the only reason why millions of people survived was from international aid groups.
Now, a story on pollution.
Since the 1970s, environmentalists have warned us about pollution threats. Many human activities, such as ship mining, has eroded soil and destroyed land. Chemical pesticides used by farmers may have caused cancer as well as tainting water supplies and harming soil needed for future farming. Oil spills are killing marine life. Gases from factories create acid rain, killing wildlife and damaging forests and lakes. Nuclear accidents have caused widespread radiation. Such results in accidents have caused the government to develop better safety methods and set up restrictions.
Still with us today is our expert. She's going to fill us in on women in the developed and developing worlds. Please tell us about this.
Women work the same job as men and still receive less pay. Women have a job outside of their home but still have the job to take care of their children and housework.
Where does this happen?
In the rural areas, men would migrate to the cities to work, and women would have to farm and do housework tasks. In Southeast Asia, young women would leave home in search of work to support the family or to pay for their brother's education. In many places, cultural traditions still confine women to home or segregate men and women in the workplace.
Thank you for coming and telling us about women in the developed and developing worlds.
Here we have an expert on the world community.
The world community has no specific organization, but is more of a movement to eliminate the abuse of human rights. With the most support coming from the UN, the world community has gained traction on exposing countries abusing human rights. Countries like North Korea and Nigeria, and more developed countries like Russia and China, they monitor and try to eliminate human rights violations wherever present.
Our next topic is global warming.
Global warming refers to the rise of the Earth's surface temperature over time. It brings about rises in sea level, change in weather patterns, and increases in desertification, and in some areas, increase in precipitation.
And now our expert will tell us about global diseases.
With the large number of people on Earth, disease spreads rapidly and causes a large issue. In the 2000 SARS, a severe acute respiratory syndrome was spread among air travelers. This respiratory disease spread from China to over 24 countries. Other diseases that spread causing a lot of concern were bird flu, mad cow disease, West Nile virus, the swine flu, and influenza. Usually these diseases spread before health officials even realize they are present to stop them. In the 1980s, an epidemic began with HIV and AIDS. This disease spread very rapidly. It took a huge toll in Africa and Southeast Asia. Over 2 million lives have been lost from this disease. These diseases take a huge toll on our world population. Treatment and prevention is a huge global priority.
Now a story on protecting children.
Worldwide, children suffer terrible abuses. A 2005 UN report showed that half of the world's children suffer the effects of extreme poverty, armed conflict, and AIDS. Children are also the targets of human rights violations. In some nations, children are forced to serve as soldiers or even slaves. The resulting abuses not only damage children but also hurt a country's hope for the future. In 1989, the UN General Assembly approved the Convention of the Rights of the Child, including the right of life, liberty, education, and health care. But ensuring these rights had proved difficult or even impossible. In developing countries, tens of millions of children between the ages of 5 and 14 do not attend school. Instead, they work full-time. Often these children laborers work long hours in dangerous, unhealthy conditions for little pay. Many are physically abused by their employers and live in conditions of near slavery. Still, their families need the income the children earn. In some cases, children must work to pay off a family's debt. Human rights groups, the UN, and developed nations have focused a spotlight on child labor in order to end such practices.
Now to our expert on indigenous peoples.
Even to this day, Indigenous people face discrimination and abuse. Indigenous peoples, including Native Americans and Australian Aborigines, are often forced off their homeland, threatening their ways of life. Along with losing their land, they also lose their lives. Newcomers that come bring diseases which have killed many Indigenous people. In an effort to put an end to these challenges, the UN set up standards to protect the rights of the Indigenous peoples. In conclusion, we have stories on natural disasters and global migration.
Natural disasters often strike without warning and affect millions of people annually. In 2004, a large underwater earthquake hit the Indian Ocean, triggering a tsunami that impacted 11 countries and left 160,000 dead and millions homeless. Natural disasters can also affect countries on a more local level. In 2008, a typhoon struck Myanmar, destroying its rice-producing region. Rice was one of their main sources of food, and the country faced famine. Despite the devastating effects of natural disasters, increased globalization has led to earlier warning systems and increased response times for aid to affected countries. Global migration occurs for many reasons. Some people move to find jobs or to be with families. However, many are refugees forced to move for things like poverty and war. Some migrants are able to find better work, but others face persecution from natural-born citizens who claim that the immigrants take jobs and services from them. Every year, the U.S. takes around 1 million legal immigrants and 300,000 illegal immigrants. As migration continues to grow, so does the human smuggling industry. Many immigrants trying to cross borders often pay smugglers to get them across the border, turning the industry into over a $10 billion a year industry.